To another episode of Start the Week with Wisdom. Today, we're going to be here with a live episode at the ASU+GSV Summit, and I'm super excited with my co-host.
Hi, Sarah Custer, Editor-in-Chief of Inside Higher Ed. Great to be here with you this morning.
Today, we're going to be able to have a conversation live in real time, reacting to a very exciting event that has brought together venture capital, philanthropy, K-12, ed tech, higher ed. Are there any other groups that we have forgotten that are here? And we have someone here who has been really OG from the very beginning of ASU+GSV. And what I love, it's President and CEO Mark Milliron from National University, but you may have known him in past lives where he was at the Gates Foundation, where he was at, whether it was WGU, whether it was at Civitas. He's actually sat in all the seats around the table of the education, technology, and innovation kind of space. So today, now he leads a massive university that is focused on adult learners and veterans and a range of others. But we're going to just in real time, hey, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here.
So we were just chatting about how you've seen this grow from the beginning, way back. Yeah. These conversations in these halls are very different. Folks at home are more in the higher education space. So we're going to try and give them a sense of what is the rich conversation that they're potentially going to benefit from as a result of this conversation. So I want to first start with you as a leader have to probably figure out how to dose yourself with learning and education and exposure to new ideas. Yeah. I'm just beyond this conference. How do you normally do that?
Well, I've seen in the world of higher education, and I'm into my fourth decade of doing this. And what I've seen is that the really good leaders are skilled at bringing institutions are constantly on a journey from novel to normal. So we're suddenly experiencing a new technology, a new technique, a new policy that's novel and people can't get their head around it. And you got to take them to a place where it's going to be normal. It's going to be used on a regular basis, but you are never out of that journey. Every time you go to an event, every time you go to a gathering of leaders or of the educators that are doing this kind of work, there are all kinds of amazing ideas that are coming in, and you're looking at this journey from novel to normal constantly happening. And one of the things we talk a lot, we actually run a program at National called the National University Leadership Academy, and it's a 12-module year-long process where we take them through how do you lead in higher ed? And one of the entire modules is how do you manage the novel to normal journey? And it's change management at your institution. And part of it's scouting. How can you do the scouting to understand what might be coming and how it could apply without falling into hyperbole or catastrophe thinking? You've got to figure out, because the dogmatic diatribes will dominate the dialogues. They're going to have people who are kind of caustic cynics, and you're going to have people who are true hyperbolists. You've got to get to the thoughtful center if you're going to do it. So one of the things we talk to our people all the time is you're a scout, you're a talent scout, you're a technique scout, you're a policy scout, you're a technology scout. What might be something we can use that'll help our students learn well and finish strong in kind of a different way? And then how do you help people adopt that?
Up with that program because you came to National and you saw a need, or is that something that existed before you?
We started developing it when I was at Civitas Learning, mainly because presidents were telling us we've got to help our leaders understand how we're going to lead in a new generation, especially with the use of advanced analytics and AI. So we started working with a group of presidents around, okay, what do you wish your leaders would have known? And we developed this whole module thing. They do a whole module on student access, success, and equity, a module on learning outcomes, both academic and workforce. We do learning modalities, level 1, level 2. Then we actually do an entire thing on design thinking. We do a whole thing on finance, how do you understand how to finance this stuff, fundraising, ecosystem work. So it's great. They come out kind of knowing what you wish they would know.
Personally, how do you, so I want to make sure we get your question. Because as a president, you can have ideas about how your people should do it. How do you make yourself, is it that you read a magazine every day? How do you?
Oh, you got to be in the conversation. So one of it is deep humility. You just understand, you constantly have to be looking to be surprised. I'm always looking for these people who are just kind of wowing you, wow, I hadn't thought about it that way. And what's great is you end up, being around as long as I have, you end up with kind of a kitchen cabinet of like thinkers who are willing to share things with each other. Have you read this? Have you read this? Have you looked at this or watched this, YouTube or whatever it is? And you end up in the conversation constantly about how it would play out. And what you want to think about is what would that journey look like? If we could use that, what would we have to do to begin to adopt it here, try it out, and and layer it in. But I'm kind of a geek in this way. Like I love that conversation. I've always been a part of it. Our University Leadership Council literally has we do a 2-hour meeting with the top 50 leaders at our university every month. And at the end of that, we always do the dessert. And the dessert is a joint reading or a joint watch we do it all together. And so we did Unreasonable Hospitality. We did Epic Measure. We did The Power of Moments. And you read it and then we come together and process it and say, what would this mean for our university?
Like a book club.
It's very much like a book club.
I love that.
So there are so many more ideas, it feels like, coming at us and coming at leaders now than perhaps there were 4 decades ago when you started your career. Maybe, I don't know, you can tell me. But how do you make sure that you don't get caught up in the hyperbole? What sort of like framework or filter system do you use? Like cut the bull from
completely.
the quality ideas that you know that you want to pursue?
Well, one is you have your own critical filter because you've seen it all, right? I've heard the exact same hype, 1,000 times. Adopt this technology, everyone's going to love it, and everybody will adopt it. It's like it's not how it works. So, even when I was at the Gates Foundation, we worked really hard at developing these kind of theories of adoption about what kind of policy support you need, what kind of practice support you need, and like how do you get that kind of larger adoption. So I'm necessarily critical about the kind of overselling of whatever it is, and then understanding that how important it is to get the human work done in terms of the training and the adoption. And just people are complex. The culture side of it, you have to deal with fear, you have to deal with aspiration, you have to deal with people who are facing retirement or people who are like they've been trained in a certain way, and adoption something new kind of frightens them. And that's the art. Right? There's a science to it, but there's an art. So for me, there's that experience. The second is just, you got to get some tough-minded people around you who will smack you upside the head every once in a while and say, no.
Right.
Think about this, and this. And that's actually really helpful.
Yeah.
I come from a big family, by the way, so I'm very used to that.
Your battle heart shooting you down. That's good.
So we're here at GSV, ASU+GSV, and I'm curious if there are any topics that are really kind of giving you that of aha while you're here. I think I'm more interested in the stuff that you were not expecting to talk about, you were not expecting to learn about, that are like, I'm going to put that nugget in my pocket and kind of roll and think about that. Well,
I think the thing I'm most encouraged about in this process is my signal processing is coming up again, having seen, again, different phases of things. But it's happening faster than I thought, which shouldn't surprise me. The AI adoption is happening faster than most people thought it would. But it's the idea that technology is the most powerful when it goes away. What I mean by that is people stop talking about just the technology. They actually talk about its use. Like, how is it going to be applied? And it felt like 2 years ago, like every presentation at ASU+GSV was like about whatever they wanted to do. And oh, by the way, AI. And like AI was like plugged into everything, but it didn't have a focus on like how AI itself was going to drive that conversation, kind of change the things. We're seeing that now. I think in the conversations at this conference, you see much more people have evidence. They've tried it. They've seen some things. Second, they're developing pretty thoughtful policies and practices around how they want to be able to do it. So some interesting kind of stuff within that. But then most important is the conversation is much more about, let's put it in context and let's put it on purpose. Like, how are we going to use it for this? How are we going to use it? And they have evidence. They've done some stuff. So it's even more intriguing. So I'm pretty encouraged by that.
We've heard lots of talking about catastrophizing. There's a lot of that around AI, but we're hearing that from the people who are creating it. Like every job is going to be obsolete in 2 years because AI is taking it over. And a lot of the conversation is being driven by the people who are creating these products, not necessarily the people who could potentially benefit from them. Are you a glass half full or half empty when it comes to AI or society in general? And then we can go on to higher education.
So when it comes to these kinds of things, and AI is not included in this, I've adopted the phrase possibilist. I mean, this stole it from Hans Rosling. Hans Rosling was one of the best kind of international theorists around kind of large scale change movements that would fix global poverty and help us address nuclear expansion. He passed away a few years ago, but his kids are kind of carrying on his legacy, which is really kind of neat. But his notion of a possibilist is he would talk about trajectory here where really good things can happen. And if we do our work together, it'll be pretty amazing how we can get there. Now, catastrophe could happen at the same time, but there's a road to possible if we kind of come together around it. And he would always say, don't call me an optimist. It makes me sound idealistic and unrealistic. Don't call me a pessimist because I'm not. He goes, I'm a possibilist. And I think if possibilists kind of roll up their sleeves and do the work, like really good things could happen. And probably the biggest example of that is probably the work on global poverty. When basically 30, 40 years ago, poverty around the world was in the 30% range, and now it's probably about 8%.
Okay.
Right. It's pretty amazing the work that they did. And it took a real focus around debt forgiveness, vaccination work, around global health work. It was pretty amazing the work they were able to do, but that was a track of possible. So that's kind of where I am with AI,
Okay.
which is like, I see what's possible, and I know we have to get to work if we're going to really kind of make that kind of difference. I also see like, boy, if it's used incorrectly by the wrong people in the wrong way, really dangerous things can happen. By the way, I felt the same way about the internet. Like I was always talking about the fact that, hey, nothing breaks your heart more than the number one groups, back in 2000, I wrote a piece for Educause called The Road to Digital Democracy. And one of the things in there, I said, what has to break your heart is that the most advanced people using the internet are pornographers and hate clips. And so we have to get in this game to make sure we're using this for the things that will actually improve society.
And just taking it back to, sorry, Bridget, I'll hand it over to you. Just taking it back to higher ed. I mean, what sort of agency do you think institutions have in this moment, and maybe even you specifically in your work at National, to make sure that higher education is really taking that responsibility to make sure AI is going in the right direction?
Yeah, I'll give you the frame we use, and it's been super useful at National, is we basically say, if you're not doing the work to try to get AI imbued across the university, and in particular in how our students learn, but also what they learn for their disciplines, it's kind of educational malpractice. And not kind of, it is educational malpractice. Why I say that is because education has always been about helping people optimize collective intelligence. So collective intelligence is, let's take all the resources we have to help us get to the level of wisdom we can make the biggest difference we can make. 70 years ago, basically your collective intelligence came from the family you were born into, your friends, your school, the library that was available to you, and maybe your encyclopedias, right? Because that was your collective intelligence. Like if somebody said something you didn't believe, it took you a while to check it out, right? But then came microcomputers and Encarta, boy, collective intelligence goes up, and then comes the internet, and boy, it goes really big. And what I was saying to folks back in 1995 is you got to get it on board with the internet, because collective intelligence is now globally expanding. We've got to make sure we get our arms around it. Back then, accrediting agencies were forcing universities and colleges to build bigger libraries to get accredited, right? And we're like, you don't need to do that. The internet exists, right? Everyone has everything if we do this the right way. And now we're there with AI, which is now it's another set of resources for collective intelligence, probably some of the most powerful learning tools you could ever imagine available. Education has always been about collective intelligence, which, by the way, includes how people use it, how they co-create, how they solve problems, which means the durable skills become more important than ever before. That conception of collective intelligence has, I think, calmed the fears, because it's not just about, the AI and the robots. It's actually like, no, education's always about, like, from the printing press to now, how do you embrace collective intelligence? We've always embraced collective intelligence. It just means we got to get smarter in doing it.
So I'm always trying to encourage higher ed to come to ASU+GSV. I always warn them, it's like very weird. It's very overwhelming.
Overwhelming is right.
Wear comfortable shoes. There's just a lot, but mainly because I see these conversations where you have venture capital and ed tech and K-12, and there are these discussions that are creating the investments in products that we will someday have to purchase. And I see historically been absent from that product development pipeline. So for me, what I always am queuing in on is, where are the places where higher ed is able to identify and share the problems that they wish ed tech would solve. And so I'm always scanning these walls for those, like what conversations are missing. So that's my perspective. I'm hoping that you can, because of your varied background, you've come from tech, from philanthropy, from system, from institution, from everywhere. I'm just wondering what conversation is missing, or what voice is missing from this space that you give us, that we can help us better understand what needs to be more.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm going to speak from the higher ed side in particular. I think the miss here, and I think it's a real opportunity space for people who want to get into it, is we still have the real problem of the college student mentality. If, you see me do this, I go to an audience and I'll say, close your eyes, think of a college student, picture them in your head up and down. And I tell them, open your eyes. How many of you thought of a 36-year-old woman with 2 kids? How many of you thought of a service member out on deployment? How many of you thought of a construction worker who wants to change their career? No hands go up. What they're thinking about is a 19-year-old with a backpack on the quad. super important population, but that is not the majority of higher education. The big chunk of higher education these days that is an expanding part of the population are non-traditional working and military students. And national, we call them Anders because they are students, and their primary identity is not just student. They are student and parent, student and employed, student and deployed. And both those identities really matter. Finding education for an Ander is different than a primary student. And well, a lot of people, because their mental model is such that they think of that college student, they design for that. And what we're trying to say is like helping students who are Anders navigate higher education, access learning in more flexible ways is different. You have to design for it. So that's why we use 4-week courses. We use individual models. We use metaverse.
Jump to assuming it's online.
Exactly. And the biggest thing is like the worst thing in the world to design for Anders is to say, let's do what we already do and just put it online.
Yeah.
It's like, no, God, right. That's exactly right. And
Sure.
so the design challenge is one where like we're trying to inject into these venture capitalists and into the people who are, the people who are going to be investing in this development is do not forget the huge segment of like 70% of higher ed students define themselves as having at least one characteristic of a non-traditional student. So there's no demographic cliff for the non-traditional student. Whatever the statistic is, it seems to change on a regular basis. 40 million, some college and no credential. They tried it. It didn't work. Most of them left in good standing. They left because their life was too complicated for the traditional model. I would argue there's tens of millions more who never put their toe in the water because they didn't think it was possible. They did the math, they did this. And so what's great is we keep talking about Anders. We're doing Anders summits right now, looking at the policy, the practices, and the partnerships that will help it be successful. And everybody comes up and starts telling us their Anders story. Like, I worked where I went to school. I was raising my 3 kids, or I was deployed. And it's wonderful. And what we want more and more is to have those stories not be heroic, but have those stories be normal and to have more of those folks to be successful. So these folks are important. If we can get the venture capitalists and the technologists and the folks doing AI, help these folks navigate higher ed more effectively, which seems to be the biggest problem. Navigation is the biggest problem. And then second behind that, how do you help them learn more deeply? How do you help them be more effective in their roles? And to me, that's the big opportunity.
I love it. So we have our last question, which is usually the best advice that you receive, but I want to know, we're here at an event where we talked a lot about the big ideas. What's the best advice you would give to someone else when they're thinking, whether it's this conference or another, to really kind of get the most of that? What is the headspace that you would encourage people to be into these spaces that are higher ed centric, to make sure that they're really getting the most value and impact?
I think you have to come in not with the preconception of, you always end up in this language conversation where the venture capitalists and the people who are in the technology world speak a different language than higher ed. And one side gets offended or frustrated with the other. You have to be okay code switching, right? And understanding what are the drivers for the startup companies, they're hustling. Right? The venture capitalists want to invest in something that's going to scale in the long run. Higher ed, we have like our thing, but people talk past each other all the time. I think you have to be able to walk in and kind of understand who these folks are and where they're coming and realize that we can align around some common interests. We're never going to have the exact same goal because, the startup founder has a different goal, that a venture capitalist has a different goal than the people who are leading the higher ed institutions. Boy, we can align around some core things we want to solve problems around and hopefully collectively do some real good to open up doors for those folks.
Thank you so much, Mark, for being here. Sarah, co-hosting as always.
Likewise.
About home with our next guest, who's going to be able to bring you more live from the ASU+GSV Summit.
Thanks.
Yeah.